Hi, and welcome to a vlog on the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. My name is Pedro Salomao with Definitive Health Partners. And with a topic so steeped in Medicare, who better to have on this vlog than a former Medicare officer, John Warren, owner and principal consultant of Gettysburg Healthcare Consulting. John, good to see you again.
Great to see you, Pedro. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. So there's a number of components of the Inflation Reduction Act. From a high level, though, can you talk about some of the components or the makeup of the bill?
Yeah, well, the bill itself is almost 800 pages long and includes a whole laundry list of different issues. There are issues addressing energy, sustainability. There's issues talking about tax reform. There's inflation-related issues. But really, what we're here to talk about today are the issues in the bill that directly impact the Medicare program and make some much anticipated revisions to the way Medicare pays for prescription drugs.
Yeah, and of those provisions, there's really four major provisions. The first one is price negotiations. So something that's been talked about before. John, can you dive in a little bit more into that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, price negotiations has been an issue, a hot button issue for stakeholders and legislators alike over the past, many number of years back into the Trump administration. What this bill would do is allow Medicare for the first time to negotiate directly with drug manufacturers the price of prescription drugs under the Part D program. The price negotiation process would start off with the top 10 most expensive Part D drugs. That number would increase throughout the years. And then in the third year, the program sweeps in those drugs that are administered by a physician in her office or Part B covered drugs.
Okay. And moving on, the next one, the next topic that people are really talking about are those out of pocket costs associated with Medicare.
Right. So we've heard a lot in the news about how to manage or control the amount of money that a Medicare beneficiary actually has to spend. This bill would cap that out of pocket cost at $2,000 a year and really would go beyond that by allowing Medicare beneficiaries to stretch that $2,000 out over the course of a year into affordable monthly payments so that they're not hit with a $2,000 upfront payment, let's say in January, instead, sort of spreading the financial impact of that over the course of a year.
Yeah, and the risk associated with this is now being dispersed a little bit more or moved on to more from a payer and pharmaceutical manufacturer perspective than currently in place. So if we talk about inflation, and obviously that's been a hot topic in the news lately, this act is no different, correct?
No, it absolutely is. And, one of the things that both Republicans and Democrats have advocated for in their own ways is controlling drug price increases. And what this bill would do is put a cap on the rate of drug price increases year to year at essentially what is the inflation rate. Any manufacturer who increases their prices beyond what inflation grows from year to year would be subject to penalties and potentially additional taxes.
Okay. And last but not least, another topic or provision that's been talked about before is the Part D reform.
Right. So I think the biggest thing with Part D reform that we see in this bill is that the coverage gap discount program is essentially going away and being replaced by another series of different rebates. Also, in Part D, there are changes to the price limits for drugs, just like we talked about inflation indexed rebates, those will apply to Part D as well. And even going beyond Part D, the bill allows for stabilizing premiums for those individuals who receive their health care through a marketplace plan.
Yeah, so there is still a lot going on. Obviously, there's a lot of negotiations that are going to occur, but there's a number of things that are pushing this forward. Although there, again, there's still complexity around this and still a number of steps that need to be finalized. So, John, can we talk about some of the tailwinds and then headwinds that really this bill still needs to go under or over?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that this bill still needs to go through before it's finalized. So, the things that we talk about today, by all means, they're not set in stone at this point. But some of the tailwinds that we haven't seen in the past in health reform bills, this bill actually reduces the deficit. So there's a significant deficit reduction aspect to this bill, which is sure to help the bill move forward through its process. We've also talked about before, both parties support drug pricing reform. Now, the devil, of course, is in the details, but at a macro level, certainly both the Republicans and the Democrats agree that there needs to be reforms in the drug market. And then finally, a lot of these provisions are going to be very popular with the Medicare population. Anything that reduces out of pocket spending for a Medicare beneficiary without negatively impacting access is going to be well received by that bloc. And as we all know, American seniors are a very powerful voting bloc. But it's not all tailwinds. There's a lot in front of this bill that it has to get through before it can be finalized. We've got, of course, all of the voting requirements. The bill has to get at least 50 votes in the Senate. It's got to get enough votes in the House to be passed. And of course, with a split Congress like we have now, there's no guarantee of those votes. Now, this is part of a reconciliation bill, which is good and bad at the same time. In this particular case, because it's a reconciliation bill, all of these health provisions could, in theory, be stripped out of the bill should the Senate parliamentarian decide that they're not really a budget-related issue. So we've seen that before in the past. Don't know if that's going to happen now, but it's definitely a risk. And, at the end of the day, time is short for Congress to act. They go back on recess next week on August 8th for a month. Then they come back for a few weeks, and then we're into midterms and the end of the year, potentially lame duck sessions. So time is really short to move on this and make something happen. And interestingly, I mentioned this is a reconciliation bill. One of the other headwinds that this could face is the voterama. Because it's a reconciliation bill, one of the things that could happen as a roadblock is that individual senators can continue to propose amendments to this bill somewhat indefinitely, and each amendment has to be reviewed and voted on individually on the House floor. So these are pretty significant headwinds that this bill could face as it moves forward.
Sure. I'd ask you what the likelihood of this bill passing in its current form would be, but historically, this is just a first step of a very complex process. So I'll ask you, what should be the next step for manufacturers? What should they be doing right now?
Yeah, I really think right now the best thing that anybody could be doing is just actively watching what's happening. As we talked about, we don't know, we can't really handicap whether or not all, some, or none of these provisions will ultimately make it into the final bill that goes to the president, or for that matter, what form they'll take when they get into a final bill. So to make any sort of strategic moves at this point, I think is a little too early. So my recommendation is just sit, watch, and wait.
Perfect. John, thank you for your time. I guess we'll stay tuned for the time being, but we will continue to give you, the viewers, updates as they come to us as well. But John, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's always great catching up.
Thanks, Pedro. Great to be here, like I say.
Yeah. And thank you again for watching this, the viewer. Here's our contact information. If you have any questions on this, we do get a number of questions and follow up with people as well. So we're happy to talk to you if you have a question in particular. But in the meantime, be well, and we'll talk soon. Take care.